Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey Dahmer was a notorious American serial killer who was active between 1978 and 1991. He is known to have killed 17 men and boys, many of whom he dismembered and cannibalized. Jeffrey Dahmer was born on May 21, 1960, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, to Lionel and Joyce Dahmer. He had one younger brother named David. Jeffrey was a loner and had few friends. As a child, he was fascinated by dead animals and would often collect and dissect roadkill. Dahmer's parents' marriage was troubled, and they eventually divorced when he was in high school. His mother suffered from depression and was hospitalized several times when Dahmer was a child. She eventually became an alcoholic and was unable to care for her sons. His father, who was a chemist, was often preoccupied with work and was not around much. The family moved frequently, which contributed to Dahmer's feelings of isolation and detachment. After his parents' divorce, Dahmer's relationship with his father became strained. His father remarried and had another child, but Dahmer had little contact with his half-brother. Dahmer's father later wrote a book about his son's crimes, in which he discussed the challenges of raising a troubled child and expressed his deep remorse for not being able to prevent his son's descent into violence and depravity. Jeffrey Dahmer had a difficult childhood, and there were several examples of disturbing behavior that hinted at the dark path he would eventually take. Some of the most notable examples include: Dahmer was known to collect and dissect dead animals as a child. He would often bring home animal bones and try to bleach them clean. When Dahmer was 6 years old, he suffered a double hernia and had to undergo surgery. After the surgery, he became withdrawn and was described as being in a constant state of fear. In high school, Dahmer began drinking heavily and using drugs. He became increasingly isolated from his peers and was described as being odd and weird. His childhood was marked by a variety of disturbing behaviors and experiences that likely contributed to his descent into violence and depravity. The birth of his younger brother. When Dahmer was 4 years old, his younger brother was born. Dahmer's mother suffered from postpartum depression, which caused her to withdraw from her family. This left Dahmer feeling neglected and alone. A bicycle accident. When Dahmer was 9 years old, he was hit by a car while riding his bike. He suffered a head injury and was unconscious for several days. After the accident, Dahmer became more withdrawn and was described as being different by his classmates. These traumas likely had a significant impact on Dahmer's psychological development and may have contributed to his later behavior and the development of his violent obsessions. Overall, while Dahmer's family life was marked by turmoil and instability, it's worth noting that not all children who experience difficult childhoods go on to commit violent crimes. Dahmer's case is a complex one, and his crimes were likely the result of a combination of genetic, psychological, and environmental factors. Jeffrey Dahmer had an obsession with violence, dismemberment, and cannibalism from a young age. His first known act of violence occurred in 1978, when he picked up a hitchhiker and took him back to his house. Dahmer later claimed that he did not intend to kill the man, but that he became afraid and beat him to death with a barbell. Dahmer's next murder did not occur until 9 years later, in 1987. He lured a young man named Stephen Hicks to his home, where he bludgeoned him to death with a dumbbell. Dahmer dismembered Hicks' body and scattered the remains in the woods behind his house. Over the next several years, Dahmer continued to kill, often selecting victims who were vulnerable and marginalized, such as gay men, people of color, and individuals who were struggling with addiction. He would typically lure his victims to his apartment with promises of money or alcohol, and then drug them with sleeping pills before strangling them. After killing his victims, Dahmer would engage in acts of necrophilia and would often dismember the bodies, keeping some of the body parts as souvenirs. He would also attempt to dissolve the bones of his victims in acid. Jeffrey Dahmer was eventually caught when one of his intended victims, a man named Tracy Edwards, managed to escape from his apartment and flagged down a police car. When the police arrived at Dahmer's apartment, Edwards told them that Dahmer had threatened him with a knife and that he had seen photographs of dismembered bodies in his bedroom. The police searched Dahmer's apartment and found evidence of his crimes, including human remains in the refrigerator and freezer, as well as photographs of his victims. They also found a large container of hydrochloric acid, which Dahmer had been using to dissolve the bones of his victims. In total, Dahmer killed at least 17 people between 1978 and 1991. He was arrested in 1991 after one of his intended victims managed to escape and alerted the police. After his arrest, Dahmer confessed to his crimes and cooperated with the police in the investigation. He was eventually found guilty of multiple counts of murder and other crimes and was sentenced to 15 consecutive life terms in prison. On November 28, 1994, Dahmer was beaten to death by a fellow inmate named Christopher Scarver while working in the prison gym. Scarver attacked Dahmer and another inmate with a metal bar, killing both of them. Scarver later claimed that he had attacked Dahmer because he was disgusted by the nature of his crimes. Dahmer's death was met with mixed reactions from the public. Some people were relieved that he would no longer be able to harm anyone, while others were disturbed by the brutal nature of his death. Today, Dahmer is remembered as one of the most notorious serial killers in American history, and his crimes continue to fascinate and horrify people around the world.